Hello and welcome back to the Company Road podcast, where we explore what it takes to change a company and to talk to the people that have and will continue to set organizations on fire in a good way with their passion and expertise. And by doing so, we're going to be looking to help you, the entrepreneurs, find your feet and make seismic waves with the work that you do today. And I'm Chris, your host, and today we're going to have a truly exceptional guest who's at the forefront of driving organizational change through the lens of behavioural science. And this is someone who I've worked with recently and who I hold in really high regards, the wonderful Angela Bliss. Angela, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Thanks. And Angela, you're a seasoned behavioural scientist and designer with over 2 decades of experience. You've worked with a number of Australia's largest businesses and government departments, and your impressive client list includes a number of household names like NAB, Telstra, Bunnings, Coles, Nissan, and key government bodies such as the Department of Health, Department of Transport in Victoria. And from what I see, from what sets you apart is your unique approach to organisational change. And you work in the field of applied behavioural science, and you expertly blend that behavioural insights with creative execution across a number of areas, but service, product and communication design mainly. And it's an innovative methodology, and it helps a number of organizations that you've worked with obviously implement those effective changes, both big and small. And you've got a number of other credentials that are as impressive as your experience. You've got degrees in economics, marketing and art history, and you've got a multidisciplinary background there. And you also earned an MSc in behavioral science with distinction from the prestigious London School of Economics, which is an amazing place. I was in London the other week and I walked past it. I thought of you. So that's good. So lovely listeners, whether you're an entrepreneur, a leader, or someone working in people and culture, ops, product, transformation, change, design, anywhere really, Angela's insights today is sure to provide you with some highly valuable perspectives on driving meaningful change within your company. And let's uncover some of the secrets to successful organizational transformation and talk about the power of behavioral science a little bit. Maybe we start with an easy one. What is behavioral science?
It's a good question. Thanks so much for the lovely intro, Chris. So behavioral science is a multidisciplinary field in itself. So it combines neuroscience, psychology, economics, and behavioral economics to understand how people make decisions, understand what barriers and biases might be in play when they're trying to make decisions, and then how do you intervene in a way that helps people make the best decisions for them as opposed to imposing decisions on them. So you can use behavioural science for good and for bad. And a sense check for myself is always, am I helping the customer or the employee or the patient make the best decision for them?
Yeah, okay. That's a concise definition. That's good. So essentially, it's helpful for decisioning by the sounds of it. Let's maybe take a step back and think about you and your career and some of the things that you've done. What's been your journey? And maybe describe yourself to those that don't know you as much.
Yeah, sure. So I started life as an economist. So I did an international business degree, majoring in economics and marketing. I did a very short stint at the Australian Trade Commission and then went to Japan, fell in love with art and design. And that was the segue into doing a master's in archaeology of Asia at a time that I was determined to become unemployable. And then I was. And so I got into digital design. So that was 20 years ago. But I've always been a kind of economist at heart. And then when behavioural economics started to be an evolving, emerging discipline, I was fascinated by the premise that we are not rational, that we are highly irrational, that we make impulsive decisions. And if you studied economics when I did, which was the Keynesian model, which is all predicated on the rational, considered decision-making process, it was quite revolutionary. And at that time, I was working within the UX field, which is, as you know, the intersection of psychology and design, and just be able to frame that within the model of behavioural economics was just another layer that I found to be super powerful when you're thinking about interface design.
Amazing. That's taking you on a little bit of a journey, obviously, away from Japan and things that were maybe less employable, as you were saying. It's obviously it's a massive need now. Like a lot of organizations out there are needing to consider not only the psychology behind the design and deliver that through the user experience, obviously, but it just feels like it's often straight to design and out the door, right?
Yeah,
there's no
exactly.
kind of way around saying that politely, but it's like, let's ship it and go. So what have been some of your challenges along the way, do you think?
Oh, look, the knee-jerk reaction to de-scope research and deep inquiry. You do data science as part of behavioural science, and I feel like the kind of going in through the data avenue is a bit of a Trojan horse. They've got, in a way, data And that whole world has a license to deeply inquire into behaviour rather than the design teams. I often find an avenue in, and often I will pair with data scientists now as much as designers, because I feel like they do have the license to explore deeply.
And what's been your experience of designers? Because obviously some are quite tuned into the user needs and customer behaviour. Others are probably more into the aesthetic, and sometimes you get the hybrid. But what's your view of the world when it comes to working with designers, and how do you get the best out of them from a behavioural science point of view, do you think?
Look, it is challenging. It's one of the reasons why I kind of couple almost more comfortably with data scientists these days than often designers, because of the designers' lack of quantitative experience. Good UXers, good service designers are pretty fluent with regards to qualitative methods, but they're often lack experience with regards to rigorous quantitative survey-based exploration of behaviour.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that quantitative side and some of the things that you help to maybe unpack, the discussions that are had on the quantitative side that would lead to an improved design in some sort of way?
Yeah, sure. So it's about being able to marry the two, so quant and qual, and to be able to use either one to more deeply explore whatever pattern of behaviour you're trying to unpack. So with quantitative, you do get the extra rigour that statistically significant findings deliver, and to be able to talk very confidently to statistical significance when you're engaging with stakeholders is very, very impactful. Whereas qual often feels a bit fluffy when you're trying to get budget to do something innovative. So I think bringing the two together is super powerful.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I've seen that work really well. And often the qualitative side seems the kind of comfy side for a lot of design conversations where it can be interpreted in one way or another. But you're right, businesses and I think decisioning is probably more, particularly now anyway, board level, that people are expecting results to be quite quantified and measures to be quite specific. And so if you've got research and data basically to back up your design or to show that it'll deliver X, Y, Z, and you can frame that up in some way and put a number against it, then that's well received usually. But it's quite hard to do, right? It's not easy to just come up with the numbers. And I think a lot of people, particularly entrepreneurs that I talk to, find it a little bit daunting, I want to say, the confidence with numbers that you either feel like you're going to back yourself and your team to do it, or you feel like, actually, I could put a stretch target down of triple the sales next year or whatever it is, or if it's conversions or whatever the metric is, it doesn't matter. I think there's a lot of fear around numbers. What do you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Within the design community, a lot of people become designers because they weren't good at maths. That tends to be the general trajectory. But if designers want a seat at the table, which often that they rightly ask for, then the ability to articulate results quantitatively, I think is really powerful, and something that designers to think about upskilling and go and do the data science courses that you can find online. It gives you very powerful language to be able to justify your design decisions.
There's probably a benefit. You're not just talking about your end user or customer, but you're talking about your internal customer, your audience within the organization. So I was saying we recorded another podcast previously where we were talking about the extent to which you have to listen to your internal stakeholders, listen to the language they use and what they're passionate about and what they're angry about and all those things. And I mean, all of that is in your toolbox really to be able to reframe your work in relation to their world and then take things forward from there. So from a behavioural science point of view, is there anything to build on that you think would be helpful?
Yeah, I think that when we're dealing with stakeholders, we're also dealing with their entrenched biases and barriers to adoption. And I think that being able to speak very confidently to the numbers allows you to confront those biases. Sometimes it doesn't work. And sometimes, as we know, stakeholders will continue on a particular path, and that's fine. It does also give you an elevated, I don't want to say status, but sometimes it's hard to break away from the notion that design is about making things pretty. And so to be taken seriously, which is what a lot of designers are angling for, sometimes being able to weaponize numbers in your favour to be persuasive and to get cut through is really worthwhile.
I think that design as the word is polarizing. For a lot of people within the organization, it's unfortunate, but that is the case. It's not understood, and designers have the best intent, but obviously their positioning isn't always fitting with that of the stakeholders that are making decisions sometimes. I think that's probably why product is becoming such a big word instead. And that's why a lot of roles are kind of gearing up more towards that, because it's all then in the language of, okay, we've got a thing, we've got IP, we've got results, we've got targets that we can attach to it, and designs, it's a different type of word. It's more to do with the practice than the output, perhaps. That seems to be helping. What other biases are you seeing coming up? You mentioned biases there. What are some of the big things that you see day to day?
Highest paid person, sunflower effect, where everyone turns to the highest paid person in the room for decision making. At the LSE where I studied, we do a whole unit on decision architecture. So how do you create not only a forum within which the best possible decisions are made, but how do you create spaces that scaffold and support good decision making? And often it's to break through that group think. And skilled designers are equipped with these tools as well. It's not just behavioural scientists, it's about good facilitation of ideas. Just certainly having to confront biases. I often will take a behavioural science-based approach to stakeholder engagement where I stand back and I really think about the biases and the barriers that I might be confronting when I'm dealing with a stakeholder and I'm trying to persuade them to go a certain way or take a risk. And so I'll design my approach to stakeholder engagement very purposefully, as I would behavioural mapping exercise to design the best outcome for a product or service or communication tool.
Yeah, I mean, stakeholder mapping, I think, is an underlooked way of running things, because often you just turn up the meeting, like people think we're just going to turn up and see what happens. But actually, there can be a bit of planning involved in getting to the right outcome for the team and for yourself, obviously, and for the stakeholder. And it's a mutually beneficial one, ideally, as well. Yeah, but it takes a bit of preparation, a bit of foresight, right? You can't just
It does.
jump in.
You've got to check your own biases too, going into these situations.
How do you do that? Because I've been through mindfulness and I know about body checking, all that sort of stuff from checking your own biases point of view. Is there anything that you find to work particularly well?
Oh, look, it's pretty hard. Ask other people what your biases are.
Ask other people, yeah.
That's a good way to start. It's just being aware that you carry a very specific lens into things. I mean, that's the power of co-design and lived experience co-design, is being able to check your biases by actually introducing diverse voices into the room when you're trying to solve a problem. Because it is very hard to identify our own biases. Most of our decisions, 95% of our decisions are made in the system 1 brain. They're impulsive, they're subconscious, they're on gut instinct. I was looking at this really interesting neuromarketing. I dabble in a bit of neuromarketing as well.
Yeah, as you do.
Yeah, as you do. The brain, they run these MRIs on the brains looking at decision-making processes, and often the decision was being made 12 seconds before the person was conscious of making the decision. I mean, that's incredibly interesting with regards to engagement with advertising, engagement with marketing, engagement with product.
How does that work? So you've made a decision before you think you have?
Yes, before you know you have. Parts of the brain that are actually triggered when you make a decision are firing off before the parts of the brain that are conscious that you have made a decision. So we think we're making decisions rationally, and we spend a lot of time asking. One of my kind of key takeaways, or one of my key lessons for my design friends, is there's only so much that we can glean from reported behaviour. So when we follow these qualitative methodologies, we're asking people, why did you make that decision? How did you make that decision? And the assumption is that we are very aware of how and why we made decisions and that we're rational. And in fact, the latest research will tell us that we don't know why we make decisions. We often make decisions in a split second. They're based on all sorts of biases that we're unaware of. So when we're relying on solely qualitative methodologies to make huge investment decisions on, do you build this feature, do you build this product, I would really suggest that you need other ways of unpacking behaviour, and often that is observed behaviour. Behaviours, so how people actually interact with your products or service or communication tools, rather than how they're telling you they behave.
I think that ethnographic side in research is particularly powerful when you do it right. It's often considered a luxury, again, in the business discussion and the things that come up, because obviously it's a bit like a smoke and mirrors. Some people don't understand how you can do that, but you can observe, obviously, how people are interacting with products, and you can glean a lot from that. I also think from an innovation and a new product point of view, or if you're thinking about service design, then that can be really powerful for just understanding the context with which your product or service will sit within the context of their lives. Because if you don't really understand that, then you can't really understand as a product designer or as an innovation leader in one way or another how your products and services is going to fit in necessarily and meaningfully. Is it something they value? Are they really going to cherish it? Is it just going to sit on the side of the table in the house, for 2 weeks? You just don't know.
And Chris, that's a really, really good call out. Another key lesson from behavioural science is context is everything. So we might say we make a decision this way, but actually we'll change our decisions and our preferences and our attitudes as our context changes. So something that often thought about. And that's where that behavioural mapping of context is a really nice supplementary methodology to the traditional kind of UX or service design approaches.
What you were saying before, it's an oversimplified understanding of how decisioning works, really, and how thinking and cognitive processing of what it is you like and don't like works.
Absolutely. Preferences are not fixed.
Yeah.
Attitudes are not fixed.
Oh, yeah.
So think
Change
about
mind.
that from a segmentation perspective, lumping people together, but at a particular time and a particular day we feel this way, but tomorrow we might feel or prefer something different. And I think there's some rigidity in the methodologies that we typically use as service or product designers that needs to be challenged alongside the evolution and how in the science of decision making.
I mean, as a proxy then, what's the nearest best way of getting to an understanding of a person's point of view or decisioning that maybe looks at some of those things? I know you mentioned observed behaviours as one way. How do we know whether
That's the best
people...
way.
Yeah, that's the best way.
It is the best way. So there's a lot of value of getting the product out in market fast as possible, seeing how people react and testing and learning accordingly. I'm not dismissing qualitative research methodologies as being invaluable. Absolutely not. There is interesting patterns that you glean from them that are worth then exploring potentially through quantitative methods. But if you want to see how people actually behave, then you need to ship your product.
I think that's why in innovation anyway, there's a real shift towards prototyping and lean startup methodologies where essentially you're putting things out and see how people respond. And for a lot of people, that's really high risk and they'd never do it. It feels like that's the way it's going, and you test with more and learn from that and then refine and reduce and craft after that.
We can't predict behaviour. It's incredibly difficult for all these reasons. I mean, if we can't even articulate why we make decisions, how would we expect a product designer to be able to preempt that?
I think so. And I also see that there's a massive amount of clutter, right? I feel like that the decisioning landscape now is probably harder, much, much harder than it was ever before. If you're thinking about what triggers the brain and neuroscience and the impulses behind all of the signals that everyone's receiving now every day because of technology, it just feels like that's not simple anymore. You can't just say, I'm going to buy this toothpaste or that toothpaste, and we're Procter & Gamble in the 1950s. It's very different, right?
That's exactly right. And it's that cognitive overload. I'm doing some interesting work in banking with vulnerable communities. And really the design challenge is, how do you design for cognitive impairment from cognitive overload all the way through to cognitive decline? And I think that cognitive context of our user groups isn't being considered enough. I mean, we talk about accessibility, but we don't really talk about cognitive ability when we're designing our interfaces and designing our comms tools, etc. So I think that's another layer that certainly behavioural science introduces into consideration sets around innovation of products and services.
Yeah, so for cognitive ability, I mean, how do we best take a look at that and how do we understand it better, do you think?
Look, it's really tricky. I'm hoping that AI might play a role here. I think the ability to train AI models to detect cognitive ability has potential. I think I'd defer to the machines on this one at scale, because it's very hard to consistently train humans to be able to detect levels of kind of cognitive decline consistently and sensitively. So, yeah, perhaps this is the role for the AI models.
I mean, now that you mention it, I hadn't thought of this before, but essentially your browser history, anything that you're doing on your phone, all of that could be processed as an assessment of your cognitive ability in one way or another. It's not like you're sitting down to do your Myers-Briggs or your psychometric testing. You could actually be assessed on how you've been working for the last 20 years.
This is my hypothesis, yet to be tested, but I think we leave a cognitive footprint when we interact digitally and on the phone that could be used by businesses to more sensitively engage with their vulnerable customers.
So I think in that sense, the role for behavioural science, it feels like will continue to evolve, because you're looking for that way to get to purest version of the truth when it comes to what customers need and want. Tools are becoming richer. Are you excited about what lies ahead?
Oh, completely. I did my thesis on the behavioural design of a bot, and I think that there's huge potential in pairing up with AI, actually, as a researcher and as a scientist and as a designer, in order to explore at scale these really tricky questions that we're facing. So, yeah, I'm really excited by the potential of working in partnership with AI to unpack some of these issues.
What we're left with in the meantime, I feel like there's been a real struggle to get organizations to even understand the value of some of the things that are used in design thinking. If you're thinking about personas, how the customer voice is represented within your organization, how people best empathize with that and use that to create and ideate and come up with new propositions, things to take to market. It just feels like it's all been a bit stuck, right? But I don't know if it's because the insights side of things has been harder for people to really work with and grapple with. There are established research methodologies and practices. It just feels like it's always a push to get people to really align upon what customers actually need in a strange way, because it should be a lot easier than that.
Yeah.
What do you think? Has that been your experience?
Oh, completely. Yeah. I think that design is a cost center. We're not often seen as a revenue driver. We're often seen as a cost and time imposition on the business. And to reduce cost and time, it's often research that's de-scoped. I think that's probably the potential of moving to these product models, is that and the observed behaviour approaches is that there is focus on delivery. And then if you move research to align more with delivery, which is not ideal, but is probably expedient politically and economically, and to be able to learn post-delivery, that's probably more aligned to where businesses want to spend their time and money.
And it's aligned to the hippo or the sunflower effect that you were describing before, because the senior stakeholders gets to go to market with whatever it is they think they want to go to market with. And then the rest of the team can then get behind it and say, great, well, we'll learn a lot through that and let's see what happens. We'll work with the team to understand how people are responding to the product or the service. So, yeah, that can work pretty well.
Yeah, and it's a practical approach. I see a lot of designers really getting upset when research is de-scoped. And of course, that's frustrating. And of course, that's not ideal. But you have to work within the constraints of the business environment within which you're working, and very much with an eye on bottom line efficiencies. And we need to work within that model.
Should we talk a little bit about attitudes to risk in that respect and appetite for risk? Like, what's been your experience of that and how have you seen it changing in the last little while, last few years? Is anything changing there?
Look, it's interesting. I'm working with a big bank at the moment that is doing some really interesting work with AI and behavioural science, which is why I'm there. 4 or 5 years ago, when I was trying to suggest that it could use behavioural science methodologies and control and treatment groups to really look at the effectiveness of certain internal campaigns or external campaigns, that just got shut down. There was absolutely no appetite whatsoever. The evolution that I've seen now in terms of risk and innovation is probably off the back of AI, actually. Businesses know they have to innovate. They know they need to take risks with this new tool. So they're making space within BAU, alongside BAU within businesses, to play around with AI responsibly, experiment and play around with AI in order to test what kind of value they can extract from these tools. And so I think that has opened up an appetite for a little bit more risk. It's imposing change on organisations that they just have to kind of suck up and deal with, or else they'll be left behind. So, Chris, I think that whilst, yes, we still kind of butt heads with conservative, risk-adverse parts of the business, I think the cultural shift that is happening as a result of AI is going to work in our favour.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a tolerance or a immunity.
It's an appetite.
It's about immunity to change and being okay with that and feeling comfortable. All of a sudden things changed, and obviously COVID was one, AI was the next wave. There's basically ways to introduce uncertainty which can result in propelling a lot of organisations forward. So if you're the entrepreneur and you can associate yourself with some of those waves of change, then it's probably a good thing, right? And you've probably seen this in the organisations that you're working within, where entrepreneurs or people within teams have got the opportunity to take some of those initiatives forward. And some people gravitate towards it, and obviously some people don't. What are some of the positive behaviours you see within organisations? If we're thinking about entrepreneurs, what catches your eye when you look at people and think, okay, well, they're on the right track with this? What's good behaviour in how it's demonstrated?
It's being able to promote innovation and promote new ways of thinking within the constraints of practical business operations. So I think there's no point trying to be a battering ram with regards to getting your ideas across the line. I think it takes a level of political savviness and sophistication to work with stakeholders and within operating models and understand how to get the most innovative, best results whilst not breaking the models within which we all have to work. I think people who demonstrate not only innovativeness and risk-taking and an appetite for change, but can do so in a politically expedient way, that always catches my eye.
No, it's good to know. I mean, some of the things that we often talk about here are strategies for embedding yourself within culture, and obviously a lot of people change from one role to another. In that respect, what's been a big learning for you in your career so far in terms of embedding yourself within a project or initiative that could be high risk, maybe not, but anything that you could say about how you typically go about doing that typifies your approach to it?
This is several years ago that you need to pay as much attention to the politics as you do the problem. That was a big learning for me. I had a very consultant mindset, especially when I started to work in-house client side, where I'd be generously trying to fix all the problems without any attention to the political landscape. So I think that's one lesson learned, is that you need to step back. You need to understand how decisions are made, who holds the soft and hard power within an organisation, and work within the system. Like following the momentum or following the flow, it's easier to swim with the current than against it. And that's the same in organisations. So to try and drive innovation internally, speak their language, use the numbers, align to their stakeholders' key metrics, speak to the benefits in their terms, not yours. Those kind of fundamentals really help. And find the kind of change advocates. Again, work with the system, not against it. Find the people who have more appetite for change and for risk and for innovation. They're always organisations. If they're as high up as possible in the organisation, they're even better.
Yeah, quite a lot to figure out then. A lot of people just say go for coffees and that sort of thing. Is anything in that practical sense been helpful to you?
Turn up face to face. If you want to embed yourself in a culture, if you want to learn about an organisation, if you want to build those strong relationships needed to be an influencer within an organisation, call me old school, but I do think going into offices and working face to face with key stakeholders is really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, behaviour change in the way that hybrid work is now set up is doing other things. What are you seeing there as being helpful or less helpful behaviours?
Look, I think we've lost a lot of that. Groupthink can be good and can be bad, but that kind of groupthink in the old war rooms with all the artefacts on the walls and a group of really focused, multidisciplinary teams trying to work through problems, I don't find Miro or Figma anywhere near as effective as kind of collaboration tools compared to actually being in the room with the team.
One of the big gaps is around facilitation, and obviously to sharpen your own skill set and approach to facilitation. It's not often taught within organizations specifically, but I feel like that is the one. Conflict management, if you're looking for visioning, or how do you align people in one way or another, it just feels like that's a missing skill. Does that appear to you?
Look, I think facilitation's super difficult. I think it takes a long time and probably a level of experience and, dare I say, seniority to be really effective at it. It also requires an understanding of decision-making processes and human behaviour and groupthink and biases to do it well. The best facilitators I see give everyone a voice in the room. Actually, a technique that we learnt at the LSE was asking the most junior people first, and also as a leader, not answering first ever. So not leading the discussion. So letting more junior people in your team answer first, hold the floor before you impose your view, because it's more likely that the team will align behind the most senior person. So all those techniques come into play. It's a really difficult skill.
Oh, it's a hard balance, isn't it? Because I've been in the situation where the most senior person does go first and then basically ask everyone else for their opinion. They're either terrified or basically undermined by what's already been said.
That's right.
But the other way around, I remember this was in Paris years ago, but there's a big presentation, right? And it was like 4 different consultancies presenting their stuff and all of that. And then 4 or 5 different business units all around this kind of massive hall. It was a huge place. And presentations went up and everyone gave their presentations. And the format after each presentation was for the client to give the feedback on that work. And it did work, like you said, but the leader at the top, everyone was terrified of. So there were 5 or 6 in each of those teams, and they went from the junior all the way through to the senior. But then the senior guy basically just squashed everything that had been said and issued his own point of view. So I think there were respectful ways of doing it without it still feeling like a dictatorship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot that behavioural science, decision architecture, choice architecture can provide to facilitators in terms of how to deal with the group dynamics. So I'd encourage facilitators to take a look at the science behind behaviour next time.
And I think to understand the decisioning flows within the organisation, you almost got to see that play out quite a few times. And that's probably why you mentioned seniority as being quite important there, because you have to see how it works.
Also being able to hold the floor, just to have the gravitas to be able to hold the floor. And I think that probably a bit more experience and a bit of seniority helps, especially as a woman, to be completely frank.
Of course. Maybe relating to other parts of your career and some of the things that maybe you found to be a little bit more uncomfortable. What were some of those and how did you get around? Did you get past some of those situations? Did you have any other coping mechanisms?
I can remember my very first presentation. So I was straight out of uni, and halfway through, the guy who was a senior man in the room said, "Just stop a minute. Your face is perfectly symmetrical." So that's what it felt like being post-grad when I came out of uni. I mean, thank gosh, workforces have evolved since then. I've always coped, and maybe this is not particularly healthy, but working harder than most other people. That was always been my fallback plan, is to strive to be really, really good at what I do. That silences the critics, I find.
In that moment, I feel like there are situations we can get caught off guard. We just need to take a moment, and it doesn't feel like time is almost on your side, but you can obviously afford yourself that time if you postpone. You can defer a decision, or if you haven't done that work in that moment and you haven't got a point of view, you can make time if you need to. But I think a lot of people still feel pressure, particularly in a face-to-face meeting environment, to just kind of come up and tell everything there. During that allotted time slot. Some pressures are still there. Maybe it's getting easier. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's getting easier. Look, I think there is more, say, controls around behaviours in the workplace that I think have benefited everyone. And I think that's a really good thing. There are still biases out there, and that's something that we all have to navigate.
There's a question as well around diversity and particularly in relation to culture, because representation, it feels like it's never been as high on the agenda in a way. But have you found from a cultural point of view anything in working particularly well from that sense that brings in the different perspectives but also contributes to a sense of shared purpose?
Look, I really value co-design methodologies for this reason, and also lived experience participant engagement, no matter what the context. So I think those methodologies go a long way, Chris, in ensuring that diverse voices are in the room. When I hold workshops, I don't like to mix senior and junior people if I can avoid it. I'd rather run 2 separate sessions where I engage with more junior, especially if it's anything related to the employee experience. I'd rather separate the management layer from the more junior layer to ensure that they have a voice. I think there's a lot of really positive moves afoot with regards to ensuring diverse and inclusive voices are heard. And look, there is a sub-discipline within behavioural science focused on diversity and inclusion and ensuring that decisions are made with those voices.
I feel like we're now in a world of many, many organisations and many cultures represented. There's some level of uniformity to the way in which organisations are now run, but also there's a competing aspect, which is the personal brand and the individual and the people that sit within the teams. And it's not just that the individual is associated with the team and the team is delivering on the vision of the organisation, but actually you've got this potentially competing personal brand, which does represent a voice of diversity, but obviously there's kind of a need for uniformity as well. So I think it's always hard to balance some of those personalities, and personalities have always been around in the world of work. What have you found works well in that respect?
That's a really good insight, actually, is the conflict between what's best for the group and what's best for me. That's always going to be the case. I think people, they're equipped now with a level of emotional intelligence to understand when someone is trying to push their own agenda rather than do what's best for the group. I think that workforces and workplaces are tolerating less the people who are just there for themselves and their own personal brand. So I'm quite positive about the adaptive nature and the ability to identify the people who just aren't there for the team more quickly and to provide support for them to focus less on the personal brand and more on what they're doing for their teams and their customers.
Yeah, so it's celebrating the point of difference and admiring that aspect, but in the context of what it's doing for the team rather than for
That's
them.
right, as opposed to what it's doing for you. And I think those behaviours are very transparent. It takes 5 seconds to really work out if someone's on the bus or doing their own thing.
Can be a little bit hard to manage when, I want to say, like 4 or 5 different stakeholders have all got their own goals, and you bring them together and actually there's problems with that, and it's already been written down on a piece of paper somewhere and that's what they're aiming at. So it feels like they are serving their own personal agenda, but actually you still need to find a way through to get them to agree on a shared purpose in a way that doesn't feel like compromise. And I think facilitating that conversation can be quite hard.
I think that's where metrics come into their own. The very kind of tangible, immutable power of numbers. I think that becomes a way of dealing with those conflicts between stakeholders. I think if you get them to align on the metrics and focus back on the metrics and not the political agenda, that's a really effective way of dealing with that.
That feels like a really helpful distancing technique from any heated topic or debate, because you can say, okay, well, let's just bring it all together and we'll agree on some good old metrics. I mean, that feels like a more rational kind of sidestep. I reckon that would work pretty well.
And so does framing the problem, getting alignment on the problem statement. That's where I always start. And sometimes that takes longer than you think it should because everyone's got a different view of the problem. But if you can get alignment across divisions on what you're trying to solve and then the metrics then to support what success looks like, that goes a long way to break down those barriers between siloed agendas.
And then taking that from your department outside, spreading the good word about this metric that you jumping for joy when you leave the workshop, got the metrics. Like, have you found good ways of engaging other teams that kind of need to know about it, but don't need to know about it, but it's good for the general perception of what your team is doing? Have you found anything there works?
Oh, look, I think the dashboard, I think just the simple communication, 1 page, 2 page. I mean, you're talking about cognitive overload. You've got to think you're trying to get the same mental availability in your stakeholder's mind as you are in your consumer's mind. And I think really simple tools of communication, 1 page kind of dashboards that you circulate to relevant departments in the organisation is really effective.
This is why it's always asked for in 1, 2, 3 slides or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if PowerPoint's helpful or not. For certain things,
It's the language and the tool that most of our stakeholders default to. So again, you've got to swim with the current and you've got to do things that append to the system instead of trying to fight it.
well, both in them understanding the information, but also being able to maybe claim it as their own and pass it on and share it with other people
Exactly.
too. So that can help. So
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's their preferred tool.
yeah, just in terms of behavioural science, and for listeners out there that still after the chat really want to find out a bit more about it, would you recommend any resources and anywhere to start exploring it further? Where would be a good starting point?
Look, I think the books, many people probably have read at least one or two, but Nudge, Predictably Irrational, Thinking Fast and Slow, all the classic texts. They're slightly out of date. Some of them are over 10 years old, but they're always a really good place to start.
Maybe we just finish with a bit about you personally and what drives you and energizes you, and how do you describe to people what's in the engine room? How does it drive you forward?
Really am interested in humans. I find it absolutely fascinating to learn about how we work, how we make decisions. Science is always evolving, so you're never up to date, which really drives me. I think I'm kind of an academic student at heart. And then to apply it practically to help people, to help them have better experiences and make better choices, to me, Chris, is the key driver. I always say I chase big problems and work with good people. That's the engine room.
No, I love it. And what you're saying, the academic side of things can really jet propel businesses forward as well, because I often reckon that 95% of day-to-day meetings are just based on common sense and what people would talk about otherwise. But if you can bring in some level of rigor, then that can just take to a completely different tangent. It can start other thought processes. It can be incredibly inspiring for people to hear about. So if you're out there and obviously you've got sources of information and things that you can reference from what's been written out there in the wider world outside of your boardroom, then bring it in,
We use the same methodologies as medical scientists, so we run random controlled trials. So not only are they new ideas, but they've been rigorously tested and it's a good study replicated in other contexts. So it's bringing those insights into corporates and into businesses and then applying those to real life practical scenarios has a huge amount of value.
Oh, I've had a good chat with you today. I'm going to leave feeling inspired and I need to look up some more things as well off the back of our chat. But thanks so much for coming on and having the conversation with us today. Yeah, if people want to get in touch with you, do you want to leave any contact details, or where can people find you if they've got a question or if they just want to connect?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think the best channel is LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So Angela Bliss, LinkedIn. I'm based in Melbourne. Feel free to ping me through that channel.
Yeah, amazing. All right. And yeah, I'll leave you to get on with your exciting work for the day. And yeah, thanks again.
Thanks, Chris. It's been a delight.